And I think we're recording. Hi, everyone. Welcome to season 3.5 of the Lindsay Morgan Snyder podcast. We are here today with Seth David Mitchell 2.0. I have a lot of numbers going on right now. And this is the first time that we're doing this on video and on audio. What do you think, Sethy?
It's like podcast 2.0 because it's, like it's double, it's a podcast, 4D.
We have a lot of numbers going on. So you guys, before we jumped on, we were discussing this whole new Zoom thing. Okay. So I know not all of you are watching us, on YouTube, but there's this new thing on Zoom where you can like touch up your facial expressions, or your looks, and I have no wrinkles right now. It's like amazing. What do you think of this, Seth?
It's been this crazy thing because as an actor, like when you're taking workshops or you're jumping into auditions, like you're on Zoom all the time. And so there's always this weird thing of like, do I put this touch up on my appearance so that I look younger and I look smoother and, all those things, or do I want to have emotions? And it's just this strange, like you're always trying to figure out, and there's actually a bar on Zoom where you can like do like a lot of filter, or you can do a little bit of filter. So then you're trying to find the right level of filter. And, my job as an actor is to be a real person, but I'm also trying not to be a real person at the same time. So.
Isn't that funny? I know. I just left mine on like the recommended amount of wrinkle remover.
Yes, I took mine off, although it feels like it's still on. But yeah, I feel like I was like, maybe I should be a real person if I'm appearing as myself. But who knows? I'll lose a lot.
Go ahead.
Oh no, that's all.
I kind of like the wrinkle remover, if I'm honest.
I don't mind it.
But I'm afraid when I look in the mirror, I'm going to be like, who is that person?
Yeah, I think that's like you see like I watch myself on screen all the time because I'm on Zoom, and then like I look in the mirror and I'm like, that's not the same person. Like even it gets in your head a little bit.
I know, it feels like it could be funky. Okay, so speaking of all this fun stuff, I wanted to ask you about improv.
Okay.
I kind of want to take some improv classes just to,
everyone should take improv.
Really?
Well, yeah, because I feel like it's an exercise and an art form that really is about silencing your shame and silencing the critic. Like you can't do improv well if you're listening to your intellectual mind that's telling you you're doing things wrong. I have one improv teacher who now I'm forgetting what he calls him, but he has he said like his little Ricardo on his shoulder or something like that, like where he has just this like French guy on his shoulder who's smoking a cigarette and kind of like, Steven, you're an idiot. That's awful. You're terrible. And so he always has to tell Ricardo, like, shut up, like you can't be here. And so I just find improv to be such a helpful tool for those of us who filter ourselves too much. Speaking of filters, it's a tool to get to yourself and just express without beating yourself up on a constant basis.
Wow, it does sound like a book I've read before. Just kidding. Wow, I love that. No, that sounds so cool. And that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about today was like your process of improv and how that like kind of led to like inner healing. Like a lot of times in like the Jesus world, we talk about inner healing and it has to be this like intense thing where we're like sitting in this room, like crying, going back to our past, like reliving all this stuff with Jesus, which I think that stuff is great. And I've been healed by that a lot, but I do think there's more interesting and fun ways that God wants to heal us. And I know just like your story of improv and how God's done a lot of healing in you. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, so I've been an actor on and off for a long time, but I kind of avoided improv for a long time as well. And then in 2016, I went through it was a really rough year, just on a personal level, had a lot of broken relationships that just kind of were really devastating to my heart, and was dealing with a lot of depression as well as the grief, and kind of just felt really lost, didn't know who I was anymore, didn't, I was talking, I mean, I didn't lose my faith at all, but it was just kind of like one of those, like, why God, like what is, one of those Job moments. And I had a friend who just said, Seth, like, you need to go find something that's just fun, that's not like career oriented, it's not for anything other than just enjoyment. And for some reason, improv had been as much as I had avoided it for years, like it just was in my brain, that's something I should do. And so I found this great place called the Improv Theater, or Improv Studio in Los Feliz in LA. And I remember going to my first class and just playing for, I mean, just like 2 hours, 3 hours, and just like going to recess. And I remember like walking out and just feeling like I breathed air for the first time in years, not just in that grief side, but I think creatively had discovered a side of myself that I didn't know existed as well. But like it was the first time in a long time that I was able to breathe. And it was the beginning of this journey of, like I've said, like there's a lot of self-critique that you kind of have to drop. Which I think at that time with the depression I was going through, there was a lot, I was beating myself up for like, you've got to get it together. Like things suck, but like, have the faith, have the right belief. God's victorious, so you're fine. Don't have feelings. I'm beating myself in that way. But I think improv helps silence or quiet that voice, maybe is a better way of putting it. But I think it became this, I mean, I think a lot of people think of improv as like comedy. But at improv, kind of their methodology is a little bit more of an actor's improv. So we spend more time actually like even doing scenes that become dramatic, like that are more serious in tone. And the goal isn't to really be, the goal is for the humor to come out of the realness as opposed to just trying to be funny. And as a result, a lot of the exercises enabled me to start expressing feelings that, I was going to therapy and I had friends that I was talking to, but there's a point where you can't intellectualize and talk about the pain and the wounds and things that have occurred so much anymore. And suddenly I'm in scenes and I'm expressing emotions on a deeper level than I actually am in my personal life, and experiencing them. And like, I feel like it was God's way of like actually enabling me. It's almost like speaking in tongues. Like sometimes we just don't have the words. I feel like for me, improv was emoting in tongues, if that's I don't know, hopefully that's not heretical, but but like of really kind of just letting things out of the depths of my soul that I didn't know how to do otherwise. So yeah.
I love that. That's so amazing. That's so fun. I mean, I just think that being able to like experience God's healing with creativity, or experiencing God's healing through something that's like a little more playful or fun, is really powerful.
Yeah,
That's like,
sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. I noticed that when I talk over you, so you guys, this is our first time on Zoom, but I find that when I talk over you, like I can't hear you. So
No, that's the hard thing about Zoom. And well, that's also like, we're such good friends. I feel like we interrupt each other all the time naturally. And so it's fighting that instinct. But yeah, like what you were saying about the fun, like I think that was the interesting thing about that journey with improv, was understanding that like God made us to be very complicated beings, like that we can actually experience intense joy and intense grief at the same time, like not just like in the same day, but literally at the same time.
mhm.
And that, like, I think sometimes when we're in a difficult period, we think like, well, like, wait, why am I smiling right now? Why am I laughing? Shouldn't I be processing the grief? Or like, if you're in a joyful moment, like sometimes there's a little bit of sorrow that pops in. And yet like those, like, we're supposed to be having layered emotions all the time. That's how God created us. So it was kind of a really beautiful lesson in that as well.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, it just reminds me of that complicated verse in scripture in James 1, where it talks about like there's joy in our suffering. We're all like, yeah, I don't really get that one. But I mean, as you're talking, I'm like thinking of that. I'm like, wow, like that's really interesting. And sometimes I think if we're going through a grieving period and we do experience joy, we almost experience guilt.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, wait, say that again. I'm agreeing with it, but my mind did not.
Yeah, no, fully comprehend. No, I was just saying that, like, I think sometimes we're in a grieving period and we feel like moments of joy for whatever reason, we can then experience guilt. Like, oh, I shouldn't be joyful in this grieving time, which actually the Bible says the joy of the Lord is our strength. So the
Mhm.
fact that he may bring a joyful moment or whatever it is in the midst of some grieving, like, is him infusing his strength in us, you know? And it just sounds like what you were talking about, like that was kind of all these things. Like, I don't know, I've never done improv. I've seen you do improv, which was so fun. And like, honestly, kind of like, wait, what's happening? At first, I didn't really understand, if I'm honest, like what was going on. Because I'm so used to going to like a play. So I'm like at this like play, but like there was something different. And it took me a minute, but I
Yeah,
can't.
no, I mean, it is. I mean, because it's. I think it's the same on the inside of it too. Like there's sometimes that you're in the middle, like just for the audience sake, like the type of improv I was doing was like it's long form, and so we do hour and a half long plays, and so instead of doing kind of the SNL sketch version of improv that I think most people are more familiar with, like we're literally having to make up a play on the spot with each other, and sometimes you're in the middle of it and like what is going on. But I think just like to your point about the joy of the Lord, I think, in the same way, the guy, I always forget his name, but the main character, the real person from Chariots of Fire, where he says like, when I run, I feel the pleasure of the Lord. And I think for me, improv was one of those places. It is one of those places that I just feel God's pleasure because I feel so where my purpose is in creativity and storytelling, in collaborating with other artists on the stage, and in laughing along with the audience when things aren't going well, like all of that. And I think in the same way, like you were saying, the joy and the suffering, like what was complicated for me as I was beginning to embrace this new craft was like, I won't go into full detail, but like, I had these broken relationships with people that I had walked with for decades in some cases. Um, and it was this weird thing where felt like I was finding myself and actually more myself without them and not being able to celebrate some of those wins with them. And so it was this really strange dichotomy of like, man, I'm so happy that because the separation itself, I think, somewhat enabled me to pursue those things. And so there was this strange guilt of feeling like, am I being selfish because they're not coming along with me on this journey? And yet I know that I feel like I'm in God's pleasure in a way that I've never experienced in my life. And like, and we're supposed to sell everything and buy that plot of land and bury our treasure in that. Like, we're supposed to give everything up for the Lord. And yet, sometimes that's obviously much harder said than done.
Yeah. Or easier said than done, right?
Yes. I was even thinking about saying that correctly or not correctly. I thought too hard and said it incorrectly, but yes.
Don't worry, Seth. I gotcha. No, it is. Well, a lot of Bible scriptures are easier said than done, like, I mean, all of them, it's like, yeah, they're all easier said than done. But I mean, I just think that's so exciting that like, I'd never even heard of improv. Really, I hadn't. I mean, I've watched Saturday Night Live, of course, but I never really understood. But after watching you and just knowing you and being friends with you, it makes sense that it would like, because you're very organized, like smart, intellectual person. And so for you to have to kind of like lay that down and like, that would be like really a hard exercise. And even like letting go of control. Like, didn't you tell me that one time? Like it was this good exercise of letting go of control. And I mean, control is that's a hard one for all of us, as humans, but it is something God wants us to like, self-control is a fruit of the spirit, but controlling circumstances or those around us is not a fruit of the spirit. So can you tell us a little more about like that?
Yeah. I mean, improv itself, obviously, like you're working with, you don't know what's going to happen before you get on stage. B, you're working with collaborators so that you might come in with an instinct about what's going to happen in the next scene. But if they say something different or set you in a different place or name you as a different character than you're anticipating to come in, like suddenly all the ideas that you had are gone. And yet not, because you can kind of adapt them and bring them in, is when you like learn to actually kind of yes and it and not get upset when someone changes your trajectory. So there's a lot of that going on. And that was really difficult for me because there was a point in the theater I was at, there was kind of like a program to go through, where you kind of went through their core program that they had four different classes, about a year long, and then you audition to get into their conservatory. And and it's generally pretty hard to get into the conservatory, and you don't tend to get in the first time. But the first time you audition, but I felt like I had the general ability to. But I remember auditioning the first time that I was asked to do something very specific in a scene that I was improvising, and I was trying to control the whole thing. Like, they literally were like, "Can you just tell someone that you love them by the end of this scene?" And I was trying to control the whole thing so that I felt like the right moment was going to come that I could say I love you. And literally the teachers who are watching this audition, like halfway through the scene, are like, "Seth, can you just say I love you to someone? Like, that's all you, like, just say I love you." And I could, like, because I was in such a control mentality, I wouldn't let myself do it, because I was like, the story isn't there yet. I haven't gotten the story there yet. And so I was tight, and I was controlling, and I wasn't giving to my partners. And I knew, like, and it was a moderately okay scene, but I knew when I finished it that, like, I had that I was on the line of getting into conservatory, and that was kind of the tiebreaker. And I didn't say I love you because I wanted to control the whole thing. And I didn't get into conservatory that round. And I realized, I think God kind of had like a little conversation with me after that, because I was disappointed and I was feeling sorry for myself, all the things that actors feel when we don't get what we want. And
or humans.
Or all people.
I don't think it's reserved for actors, but no, I know what you mean.
Like, the next audition was in 6 months, and I knew that my choice was to either sit around and feel sorry for myself and hold on to this control, or I needed to go to class and fall on my face every week, every scene, and just go in with no plan and not know what was going to happen, and learn, and just really learn to let go of control. And and God was so gracious in teaching me that. Like, that next 6 months was hard. It was hard, and it was humbling. And because I found myself naked, creatively naked on stage, I should say.
You'd be like, "Seth, what are you not telling us?"
Creatively naked on stage. But like, I became a completely different improviser and actor and person from that, because, like, experiencing failure and actually not viewing it as failure, but rather as a part of the process, was, I'm still very much learning that lesson. I still do not like to fail. I'm still a recovering perfectionist, as people probably can notice, and even the way I correct myself during this podcast. But but it's beautiful to learn, like, failure is part of process, and failure is not really failure. It's not something that's scary. And God's in it as well. Like, he's always bringing his glory out of everything. So fail away.
Fail away, fail forward. Yes, that's so good.
That song, like, sail away, sail away. They should make it like a fail away version of that.
I love that song. So could you sing it for us?
That's all I know. So.
Oh, I love that song. I'm definitely going to turn it on after this podcast. That's so good. That's so cool. I love that. So, okay. So Seth, like, you've had this long journey and you've done a lot of cool things, but I know some things are starting to open up for you. And so can you share a little bit about, like, your just like acting, like, because you've moved to Texas and you were in Texas the last time we talked.
Yeah.
But even since the last time we talked, Seth David Mitchell 1.0, you, like, just some things have started to happen for you, and it's like exciting and yet kind of like causing some internal turmoil. So would you share with us?
Always growing with the Lord. Yeah. So I guess towards the end of the year, I'd moved to Austin, and I was kind of like, Lord, like, what am I going to do as an actor? Like, what exists? Like, there's theater out here, but, like, is the Hollywood's not really here. And, like, what does a career look like? And did I just, like, kind of shoot myself in the foot? And yet I knew that I was supposed to be here. And so towards the end of the year, the Lord, it's also been interesting. I'm saying the Lord is like, that's a rabbit hole. I'm not going to go down there.
We love rabbit trails, so you feel free. You just go where you go.
realizing that I have not been in this weird COVID-y new environment that I'm in. I haven't been around a lot of Christians. And so saying the Lord is like, I was like, oh, like I can say, like, cause I actually got corrected by a non-Christian the other day of like, can you please not say that? Because it's a little bit triggering. And so like, I just had like one of those moments of like, oh, I'm with people who understand my language, and it's nice to be with you. Um, but you know, yeah, the Lord had he had introduced me to an acting teacher out here, and I had not really wanted to jump back into an acting class. I was kind of like, I'm done. Like, I can't do, like, I need to learn and I need to grow, but I want to learn and grow by doing, not by being in a classroom. And this teacher had been recommended to me, and so I reluctantly look her up. And it turns out that she worked with my favorite acting coach in LA for years, and that he actually comes in, and I mean, in COVID, is Zooms in for some classes, and it was just like, and her studio has vocal training, like a guy who works with Broadway level talent on their singing voices, and there's an improv section there with a woman who also does long form improv, and so it's like all these things of like, all right, Lord, like I'll go to this acting class because obviously something's been set up here. And I meet with her name's Carol Hickey. If anyone's in the Texas area, she's great. You should look her up. So I meet with her, and she's like, have you gotten an agent while you're out here? Like, things are like really, like, at this point, LA, film production and commercial production was shut down, I think, for the second time. And so a lot of that production's come out here, actually. And she's like, you need to, like, she's like, I'm auditioning like 2 or 3 times a week. Like, you need to find an agent. And I was like, it's a regional market. It's not LA. It's not what I want it to be. And all the things, that we humans like to complain about. But I feel the Lord being like, nope, just put yourself out there and submit to, like, there's, about six relatively big agencies here in the Texas area. And so I submitted, and, unlike LA, like, people respond very quickly, and they were really nice. And like, I had, and the people that I signed with, Pastor E. Bosby, out of Houston, Texas. Mitzi is the name of my agent. I hope I can say all this publicly. I think I can. You can look it up. So it's public info. But like, she was just like so delightful to talk to. And in my first meeting with her, like, I'm expecting for most of our conversation to be about commercial stuff, and there's not really a lot of room for film, TV. And so I mentioned, like, so how is the commercial realm working? And she, like, automatically is like, oh, like, you would want to do commercial as well, because, like, there's also a lot of theatrical, and that kind of would be our main focus. And I'm like, that's what I want. Like, that's what I want to be. Like, I love commercials. Commercials can be fun, but like, theatricals where, you feel like you can actually dig in as an actor. And so it was just like all these places, like, the Lord was just like, I have exactly what you've been looking for in LA here in Austin. Like, and so now I'm signed with this agency. I've been, I got a call back for a national commercial the other week. I have been getting bigger TV film auditions than I've ever had in my life. And it's just, and I'm learning and growing from doing that. Cause it's also like, I mean, the Lord is always challenging again, in my perfectionist attitude, I can be a little bit of a pessimist. And so, like, when you get a commercial audition, with all the self-taping that we have to do out here, you're almost being asked to, like, film the commercial. And like, rather than just like doing a slate and read a line, like, you kind of like, well, you saw the one that I sent to you that was kind of funny. Like, I had to do this one thing where they asked, so like, if you have kids that you can play with in this thing, like, could you bring your children into it? I don't have children. And so, like, my first attitude is like, well, Lord, I can't do this. I just shouldn't accept the audition, because, like, I don't have kids, and, like, obviously they're not going to hire me. And then, like, the Lord's like, Seth, you're an improviser. Why don't you just pretend to be the kids as well as the role that you're filming? And so I ended up doing, like, this fun little, like, sketch where I played a little boy and a little girl and their father, and I got the call back. And it was, and more than even just like the result of getting a call back, or like knowing that casting liked what I sent in, like, I had fun. And realized, like, oh, like, maybe I overthink these things, and if I just do, I might enjoy them. So a lot of that kind of stuff has been happening on the acting side.
I love that. Fun. That's something I feel like the Lord showed me, a year and a half ago now. He was like, what if finding freedom in our lives could be fun? Like, what if we took, like, 2 things that are kind of diametrically, is that the right word, Seth, opposed, or something like that, and what if they could be one? What if finding freedom didn't have to look like always? I mean, sometimes I think it is intense, and I'm not going to say it's never going to be intense, but I think for me, I was like, it's going to be this really hard, like intense thing forever, and it kind of was for me. But I do have very fun personality, but it was all like oppressed by this, like, pain and all these things, and it was like I had to get through all that or whatever. But then I just feel like the Lord is like, what if finding freedom could be fun? And I'm like, that sounds fun, Lord, and so I love what you're saying about the improv and just like having fun in the process, right? Because the process of life can be like not fun all the time, even though I'm a 7 and I kind of wish it was, and I try my best to make it all fun. But like, I just think that's powerful to think like, oh, the process can be the fun part, even if you don't get the this, that, or the other, because I think a lot of us think when we get this, that, or the other, then we'll be happy. When
Yeah.
we get this, that, or the other, then we'll be at peace. Then we'll be okay. Then we'll be satisfied. But for me, the this, that, and the other would come true, and I would still have that emotional issue.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think like what you're saying too is like, I mean, it seems so obvious, even though it's like it feels also some days impossible to live in that. But like, I mean, if we enjoy the process, if we're actually having fun in the process, then of course, like, why would it matter as much if we get the thing at the end of it? Because we've had all this fun along the way. And like, so like you've had this adventure. So why like, oh, it didn't, we ended up somewhere else, but like, how much fun did we have with the Lord on that adventure? And that is the gift. That's, that, and the goal should be in the end, I mean, again, easier said than done, and not quite where I am, like I'm maybe speaking to my own heart, but like, the gift and the joy of life is living it with the Lord, is continually, like, whatever the process is, when things are seemingly coming together and when things are seemingly falling apart, like getting to do it with him that's the joy of our life.
Yeah, I know. It's so good, Seth. I love that. That's so powerful. It's so powerful. It just is like, I mean, so many things are popping in my brain. I just remember, like, this is a little bit of a trail, but I just for some reason remember like a really tough thing that happened to me like 9 months ago when everything was stolen out of my storage unit. And so sad and really freaking ticked at God. Okay. Can we just be real for a minute? Like, I was like, you have got to be kidding me. You know what I mean? Like, Lord, like we have been through some things, but now everything I own is gone. Like, I was not happy. And I just remember sitting there and like, this sounds really weird and I can't believe I'm even saying it, but we love to be vulnerable here on this podcast. But I just remember, and you actually came and were such a sweet savior to me in that moment, but like, or hero, maybe I shouldn't call you my savior, but like, but I was sitting there in the midst of all my junk, or not junk, but like just the trash that was left in there. And I was just sitting there and I was so sad, but like, I felt God so close to me and I was mad at him, but he still was close to me, which is interesting. And it says he's close to the brokenhearted, but like I was mad at him. My heart wasn't just broken, I was ticked at God. And but he was still so close to me. And I just remember being such a precious moment that I like set up my camera and like took a picture of it. Like I took a picture of myself with all my junk, with all this trash around me, because the moment felt so like precious to me, and I was still ticked at God for a few months after. So it didn't resolve the tickedness. Is that a word? It didn't resolve my anger with God, but it still was this like precious moment in the midst of like a huge loss after there had already been kind of a hard 5 years. And then this, I was like, and you were so sweet to come and like, be like, yeah, now let me help this girl. But I mean, I don't know, like, do you have any thoughts on just like where he's so close to you? I know before we were kind of talking about this, but where he's so close to you, yet like, I don't know, there's just this moment of like, not even disconnect, but just like, I don't know, it's just like everything isn't lining up in your mind or your heart.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think I mean, it's interesting what you say about like the Lord being close to the brokenhearted. And because like we were talking earlier before we did this podcast, like that I am in this, like as much as everything's coming together, like I mean, it feels strange to say this after you're sharing the story about having like some really precious things taken from you, and I'm like, my life's coming together, and I'm furious with the Lord. And so like, I mean, we were talking earlier about like the dichotomy that sometimes you feel grief or you feel anger or whatever in a time that like should be quote unquote should be, and for those who are only listening, we're quoting should be
We're air quoting
air quoting should be joyful. And I have found that in this season of my life, I feel maybe this is the way to put it, I feel the closeness of the Lord more than I ever have, and yet I feel the most resistant to talking to him, to praying, to I'm going to church out here, but I generally walk out about halfway through, and I don't even fully understand like what's going on in my heart, but I'm furious with him. And it's been this weird thing because I can sense him, like right now, like he's right here, and he's just so happy about where I am and what I'm doing, and he's so excited about what's coming, and he's not worried about the fact that like, I mean, I think because he knows like my anger is actually, like you're saying, I'm brokenhearted about some things, and I'm not even sure what those things are completely, but like he's not scared of those things. Like he appreciates and knows process. And I do think on some level, what I do know is that the anger that is coming up, like I feel like he's like, yeah, no, that's been there for a long time, Seth. And actually you're being more honest than you have been in a long time. And so actually that's why I'm happy. It's not that he's happy that sometimes I might fall back into old sin patterns or things that damage me or damage our relationship, but like so he's not happy about that, but he is happy that I'm more honest with him about what I'm feeling, and he's actually closer to me as a result, even though I'm like, go away, leave me alone, give me the good things, but please don't talk to me about them.
Yeah. No, that's so true. Well, even Seth, when we were talking about this before we jumped on the podcast, that's kind of what I had a little sense of. I'm like, oh, it's not that stuff was never like, I mean, and I'll just speak to my own situation, but like for me, yeah, I went through this time like 6-7 months after my stuff was stolen where I literally hadn't cussed as much as I did in this like 2-month period for the past 10 years. Like I don't really cuss. I hadn't cussed in like 10 years. But over these 2 months, like my mouth was not pretty, and you heard some of that. But like, and I was so scared that I was like, like, oh my gosh, God, what's wrong with me? Am I losing my mind? Am I going crazy? And I talk to a lot of people that are really strong Christians and love God so much. And a lot of times they are like, am I going crazy? Like they literally wonder that. And I'm like, oh, I also wondered that. And the Lord just said to me, I'm not scared of your process, Linz. And he's like, there's nothing wrong with you. There's just things that were in you that are now coming out unfiltered. And it scares you because you've kept them all tidy in there. But I actually already knew they were in there because I live inside of you. So I knew it was all in there and I wanted it to come up and out. And I know it's a little unbecoming, but it's important. And honestly, after that season, after it all came out, I didn't really like behavior modify. It just stopped. I mean, I don't even know exactly why or how, but it was like those 2 months of intense, whatever that was. I don't even know. I don't know how to explain it or what it was. And I don't care to really. I don't feel like the Lord is saying like, let's go back and dissect that. He's just like, no big deal. It was there. But then I experienced this freedom and this like joy, and I had some healing to do, but it was such a shift. And so I'm all about process. God is all about process. I mean, if he wasn't, why would he have pregnant women like wait 9 months to have a baby? Like God's all about process, and he's not scared of our process. He's not scared. He's not worried about it, and Melissa Johnson, who you and I both know, she was on the podcast a while back and she talked about her angsty, what'd she call it? Like an angsty teenage phase with God.
It's amazing.
Where she was like, it's like when you're a teenager and like you kind of hate your parents, but you love them. You know what I mean? And you're like, I hate you, but I'm still gonna like sit at the dinner table with you because you make me. She talked about how like she would go to church and she didn't want to be there and she was mad at God, but she'd sit there, you know? And I do think God kind of like snickers at us, you know. He's like, oh, he's like, look at them, like they love me. They're just in their angsty, is that what she
Yeah.
said? Angsty teenage phase. So yeah, it's real. It's real
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, no, because I feel like it's like, you know, those dads who like take their kids to school when they're like in high school and like the kid hates them and they like yell out the window, I love you. You're the most amazing child I've ever seen. And I feel like that's exactly what God is doing right now. And it's so strange to understand it, but also like not like know that I just have to go through that process. Like I have to go through whatever this angsty teenage adolescent rebellion, but not rebellion that's going on, and trust that like it's okay that I'm pissed at him for loving me, and that like you're saying like at some point, I mean, because it's been the interesting thing has been like he won't really, I, you know, like I think you know me well enough, like I talk to God all the time, like from like a little kid, like I just have long drawn out conversations and we talk back and forth, and and this has been a season where he has just been like, no, we're not gonna talk about your feelings today. Like I'm like, I need you to go learn this song, I need you to work on that audition, I need you to do these things. And like, and it's not in a, there's no like I'm over talking with you or like a dismissiveness. It's just that's not going to help you. Processing verbally is not the season that you're in. You need to actually go and like receive what I'm giving you, and you're not going to receive it well, but you're going to receive it regardless because it's coming. And 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 trust, like, I mean, it's helpful to hear what you said, like that at some point like there's just a shift. And like, and I do feel that shift some days, like some days like I get through and I'm like, oh, like I'm walking in a freedom and an identity that I've never known. And just it doesn't matter that there's some heart surgery going on while I'm doing it, like I am doing well, strangely. And you know, it's kind of like the, which novel is that? It's the best of times, it's the worst of times, isn't that A Tale of Two Cities? But you know, and I mean that's what it kind of feels like, a little bit Jekyll and Hyde. But it's interesting to be in another season. Like I had said with improv, like improv was this place where I could speak my emotions in a way that like felt like it was kind of in tongues. And I feel like it's the same with this, where the Lord's like, he's like, you're not going to learn from me by having this conversation. You're going to learn from me by doing. And and it's really frustrating to someone who likes to analyze, but some part of me trusts him enough to walk that path with him.
Yeah. Well, and it feels like an upgrade to me, you know, and sometimes like the upgrades don't feel like upgrades at first. Like, I remember when God started speaking to me in my dreams, like night dreams, and I was so frustrated because I would wake up and there was like 75 scenes in my dream. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, why can't you just tell me directly what you want me to do, God? Like, I don't have time to like analyze all these scenes in my dream and figure out what you're saying. Like, can't you just tell me directly? I was so frustrated and I'd wake up with like anxiety and I would like try to get people to interpret my dreams. And I'm like asking all my friends. And finally, one of my friends, Emery, she said, Linz, I think God is inviting you to learn to interpret your own dreams. I think he wants to show you another way he speaks to you. Not that he wants to take away the old way, but he like upgrade, you know, he wants to like bring you into this new place. And it didn't feel great to me. It felt a lot easier to do what I knew how to do, which was like just hear from him and do what he said, you know. But now all of a sudden it's this new like covert way, you know. And my dreams were never direct. Like my dreams were never like, and I had a dream that I went to the store and bought this or whatever. My dreams were all like, the word isn't mystical, but what's that word? What's the word, Seth? Like
Whimsical or fantasy or um
Holy Spirit, what's the word? Metaphorical.
metaphorical. Yes, that's yes.
Lord.
That's what
Holy Spirit.
you come to it on your own.
Holy Spirit is smart. I ask him a lot, but they were all metaphorical. So they were all these like stories, inside of my dream. And I'm like, someone just tell me. But now, I was frustrated for a little while, but then that shifted. And then I kind of, now it's almost a game. Now it's almost fun. I wake up and I'm like, oh, I get to like talk to God about my dream. But there was that frustration. Then there was that kind of like maybe even a little confusion. But then it came into like, oh, this is actually fun, So I believe that for you too, Seth.
Thank you. I receive that as well as I can.
No worries.
I do receive that because I think there's definitive. I mean, there's just definitive truth in it. Sometimes we don't need to understand the process, and we need to trust it because what God has for us is always good, even if it's tough. Like when He's stretching us, it's worth it, and it will flip into that joy because that's what He has for us.
Yeah. So good. So good, Seth. This is so fun to have you on Seth 2.0, my first ever video podcast or whatever this is. We'll figure it out as we go along, but so fun. Is there anything that we talked about that we didn't get to talk about? Anything to your heart?
The only thing that we didn't talk about is childhood crushes. But but I don't know.
Let's do it. No. Well, okay. So let me set it up a little bit. So Seth and I've known each other for a little while, but God kind of reconnected us at one point. And the funniest part was, I don't remember exactly who said it first, but I think I had been watching Murder, She Wrote, like on Netflix or Prime or whatever. And I don't know why, but I was so into it. It was just like I was binging Murder, She Wrote, and it was just speaking to me and I was loving it. And I felt a little strange because it wasn't what everyone was binging at the time. And I don't know, I don't know what I happened to say to you. What?
There were some people, but not quite that. It wasn't quite the hit show of like, Netflix.
No, exactly. It was like Lindsay and a few other randoms in the world. But I happened to say that to you and you got like really excited because you also.
Angela Lansbury is my first love. She is maybe perhaps the love of my life. I think it's a mix of, honestly, it's a mix of two things because it is Angela Lansbury, but it is also like, I love murder mysteries. Like I just love them. And I'm like a big Agatha Christie guy. And you can't get better than Agatha Christie. I like Sherlock Holmes, he's great, but like Agatha Christie is like cozy murder mystery. Like that's what I love. And Angela Lansbury, I want to move to Cabot Cove. Like who Cabot Cove. You need to be careful in Cabot Cove. You might get killed. You might get murdered. It's a very dangerous town. But aside from the murder rate, I want to live there.
And have a bicycle with a basket on it, because that's kind of my dream.
Yes. And it was both one of the most disappointing and exciting moments of my life was I think it's at Universal Studios in LA is where they filmed. Like that's like there's a whole like they still have the Cabot Cove like dock is out there because they use it for all different types of films, and so that's where they filmed her on her bike. Yeah, and so it's like it's right there in LA. Still Murder, She Wrote is still alive, and Angela Lansbury is still alive, and I am all about the revival. She needs another nephew. I am available. I have an agent. I feel like this might be what the Lord is bringing together.
Yes, that is so good. Yes. Oh, aren't you a producer?
Yeah, I need to figure this out. And
it all began on the Lindsay Morgan Snyder podcast. What'd you say?
First Zoom Lindsay Morgan Snyder podcast.
Yeah, we're still kind of sorting out how to talk to each other and not speak over each other. It's great. This is so great. Oh my gosh, I love that, Seth. I love our mutual love for Murder, She Wrote and Cabot Cove. And I can't believe I've never been to any of the studios. I've never even been on a studio lot.
Oh my gosh, no, you definitely need to. I don't know where things are with the COVID rules, but like everyone should. Being on a studio lot, it's like even if you're there to tour, I don't know. It is weird like how God creates us. Like there are just certain places that you you have a love for, and studios are one of those places. Like it's just a wonderful, magical place. So because it's just the magic of movie making. It's amazing.
Mm. I think, yeah, I think that's the stuff definitely on the 2021 adventure list for Lynn. So that's so cool. Oh my gosh, I love that. This was so fun, Seth. I'm so excited. Thank you for coming on 2.0. We'll more than likely have a 3.0 with you, but thank you for sharing with us just your healing journey and your real and raw story. And it's so powerful. We just love that. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's always a delight.
Yes, we have fun. Okay, cool. I will see you later. See you later, everyone. We can't wait to be back with you next week. I'm not sure if we will be on 3.5 again or if we will start season 4, but it's always going to be fun. We always have precious, fun people on talking about real, raw stories in their life with entertainment and art and all the good things. So we'll see you then. Bye.